you're gonna look great. But if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better hit the GymWits. That's right, man. Tell 'em.
Welcome to the GymWits podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic.
And we are the GymWits. So today's a special day. We finally have a sponsor after like 2.5 years of podcasting, freshly.com. We'll talk about it a little bit later. I've had a really good experience.
For what
so
it's worth,
we've
had many offers, but we just don't accept willy-nilly sponsors. So they have to be really good.
We have to like what we're pushing.
Exactly.
So anyway, did you see the UFC this week?
I did. Now I know that a lot of our listeners aren't avid fight fans, so we're not going to talk about it for too long, but it was such an amazing card, really remarkable. It was just awesome. And I guess there's something that can be learned from it for anyone, that the unstoppable women's champion, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, lost very badly. She got knocked out in the first round, and we were shocked by it because of her skill level. But Ryan seems to think that she took her opponent lightly, and as it often is, hubris, pride, overconfidence can be the downfall of anyone.
Yeah, it's good. Funny you mentioned hubris. I do a podcast does Walking Dead reviews, and I'm always talking about Rick. Well, you don't watch it anymore, but Rick's hubris gets him into so much trouble, and it's a problem. Like sometimes if you're a little overconfident, you fall. We've seen it happen time and time again, and I think there is a lot of she was overconfident going into it, and I think she paid for it dearly. And
let's not take away anything from Rose.
No, Rose was
awesome.
great, and she fought the perfect fight for her. And the problem was that Rose, it seemed like her coaching was geared towards fighting Jędrzejczyk's or Joanna's weaknesses, where Joanna seemed like she was just going out there like, I'm just going to mess her up. It doesn't matter. And so she didn't adapt. And if you want a great podcast, one of the best, if you want to, talk about striking and the technical, is the guy, Jack Slack, who's a writer and podcaster and does amazing analysis. And so if you are into MMA and you want to hear some great analysis of the fight, of the fights, both pre and post, I think he wrote about it before, but then did the podcast about it after. After you finish the GymWits, listen to Jack Slack.
Yes.
It's great analysis. But basically, Rose fought the perfect fight for Joanna, and Joanna did not adapt. I think that in the future, if she trained for her better, I can see her, coming out victorious. But it was a great upset, a great fight, and definitely not to take anything away, because she fought brilliantly, and it wasn't a fluke. The other fights were great too. Dillashaw and Garbrandt was a great fight. That was one of those fights though where they fight 10 times and they each win 5. I think it was just pretty evenly matched. And then of course GSP,
which was great to see. One of the all-time greats, top 3. He's probably got to be in the top 3 at least.
I mean, Jones would be my number 1, except that he keeps getting in trouble.
We don't know how much Jones has cheated throughout his
Anderson,
career.
as great as he is, he lost in his prime, not in his, maybe slightly out of his prime, but I say it's hard to argue against GSP being the best fighter of all time.
Yeah,
maybe. How can you argue? He avenged every loss, every one of his losses. He avenged. Even when the fight with BJ Penn where he won, we all thought he lost the first time. He avenged that one brutally. He comes back after a long layoff. Heavier weight, fights the champion. Very clearly wins. I think he was a little rusty, but he looked great.
And he fought up a weight class.
Fought up a weight class. So I don't see how you can not say he's the best of all time. So, and it was a great fight. I called him winning. I got the other 2 wrong, but I thought he would win. I thought Bisping, as good as he has been, he just did. GSP just has so many tools. I was scared. He looked like he was getting a little tired.
He was,
but he got messed
deep.
up.
That's what a champion does.
No, he's great. It was a great fight.
So, congratulations to Rose Namajunas, to TJ Dillashaw, and of course to George St. Pierre for winning the middleweight title. Now, something interesting. Yeah. I don't know if Dana White, the president of the UFC, was telling the truth, but he said that in Canada, the pay-per-view buys in this last UFC actually outdid Mayweather-McGregor.
In Canada?
In Canada, yeah.
I mean, I can believe that. From what I understand, GSP's, well, not from what I understand, the president, or is it prime minister or president? I don't know what Justin Trudeau, whatever he is, he like sent out a tweet, congratulating George St. Pierre. So I can believe that, he's one of their biggest athletes, if not the biggest athlete, in Canada. So, or active athlete. So I can believe that it did, it did really good, pay-per-view numbers. Because Dana White is known to inflate things a bit. So, who knows, but I'm sure that it did massive numbers there. And it deserved it. I mean, it was one of the best cards.
The rest of the
all
card
time.
was
it
really
was a
good
fantastic
too.
card. So it was
Right?
one of the
Throughout
few
one of
times
those
where we
little
kind of
gems that you get.
on paper it looked great and it ended up being great. We rarely get that, but maybe one of the best fight cards of all time. Definitely up there.
Absolutely.
All
So
right.
what do we have on the agenda for today?
Well, we have on the agenda an interesting study. So we're back. I feel like we haven't done an interesting study in a while. This one's pretty interesting actually. It's walking below the minimum level of walking can still have benefits. So obviously we live in a society
Basically
that is
saying any walking. Is good.
or anything is better than nothing. So basically we live in a society that is pretty sedentary. So typically, the recommendations are 150 minutes of moderate activity, of which walking can be included, or 75 minutes of vigorous activity is the bare minimum you want per week. And most adults are half that level for the 150 minutes, and it's even lower for older adults. So it's known, right, that walking lowers the risk of a number of diseases. And this particular study was from the American Journal of Preventive Medicine, and it looked at, there was over 150,000 participants in a cancer prevention study. And basically 7% reported no moderate to vigorous activity. Of the 93% of that rest, 95% reported some walking, and a significant percentage reported walking as their only form of exercise. So what this study found was that 2 hours of walking lowered all-cause mortality. And then if you double the recommended number, it was a 20% increase in all-cause mortality. Wow. So, it's a pretty large sample.
Sure.
And, it does go to show that a little bit can go a long way.
So is it safe to say that the walkers are probably in much better health
than the non-walkers?
Yeah.
I guess.
Like from The Walking Dead.
I was like, are you making a Walking Dead reference? Yeah. Right. So
they have a better mortality rate.
So
right?
Yes. So proven that walkers have a better mortality rate. So now what's important here is often people kind of conflate walking with desired fitness goals, and that's a little bit different. And we'll be talking a little bit about that on the kind of main discussion of the podcast. But walking is great to maintain your baseline of health, and it's really important, and it's something that you should do. But it's not going to. You're not going to lose, you're not going to shed the pounds just walking unless, you're so deconditioned that that's the only form of exercise that you can get. So, keep that in mind, because, it's one of those things, kind of like the people that will, eat a burger but then have a salad and say, oh, well, I had a salad. Like it's important. It's something that you want to do. And again, as shown, even a little bit of walking will protect you from, or increase your chances of not dying, but it's not going to get you those, the abs that you want, or you can help you lose the weight. You still need to do the extra work. So, it's a little thing I want to add to the end of that, because,
sure.
Obviously walking is important, but again, sometimes people take that a little further than it should be.
So now, what if someone does have fitness goals? They do want a better body. They do want to shed the pounds. They want to be more athletic, but they want to do it themselves.
I would say great segue. That's the discussion for today. So, DIY fitness. So basically the idea of this is it's nothing you can't find online or you gather from talking to us.
No, it's true. You can't find it online.
Most people do this themselves, but basically the idea is kind of start to bottom. What are things to consider if you want to do your own workout program? Let's say you're like, all right, I haven't worked out in a few months, and you're like, all right, I'm going to go back to the gym tomorrow. What do I do? This is a little step-by-step guide to, what processes do you have to kind of check off or go through in order to develop an exercise program that might work for you?
And I just want to highlight what you just said and the importance of it. I have seen so many friends, relatives that are trying to get back into shape, or getting to shape for the first times in their lives, right? And they go to the gym, and it looks like they don't know what to do, right? Maybe they'll do some obvious exercise that they know. Maybe they'll do some bicep curls, or they'll run on the treadmill for 20 minutes or something or jog or something like that. But it seems like they're lost. And as we know that, yes, of course, going to the gym and doing anything is better than nothing.
Yeah.
But it's not a very efficient use of time. And most likely, in so many of these instances, sometimes after one workout, they quit.
Yeah.
Right? They have no goals. They have no strategy. They're just going in there thinking that they can go to the gym. And of course, it fails. So that's why having a really solid program, right, that you can create yourself is so important.
Yeah. So, so I mean, that's it. So we're just going to talk about, okay, what steps to take to kind of do it yourself, figure out your own workout program without it being too complicated. In general, as with the walking, anything is better than nothing and will yield results. So, you don't have to get too specific with the workouts. I think you get more specific as the goals increase or as the level of specificity increases. But when it comes to just kind of getting in better shape, just getting in there is going to be better than nothing. So, it doesn't have to be super
Consistency
specific.
is king too.
Yes.
To continue doing it. All right. So I would figure the very first thing that you would have to be concerned with are sort of the logistical aspects of it. Are you a member of a gym? Are you willing to join a gym?
Yeah.
Right? Do you have weights at home? Do you have access to either cardio equipment, a swimming pool, a track, or are you outside? Is the weather, does that allow you to run outside? Those types of things. Would that be correct?
Yes. You just answered the question that you were supposed to ask, but it's okay. No. So level 1 is practical concerns or logistical issues. So there are things you want to consider. Are there time constraints? How many days a week is realistic to work out? What is your current exercise regimen? That could help. If you're working out 4 or 5 days a week already, then great. You kind of have 4 or 5 days built in. What problems have you had in the past? What obstacles are there to exercise? So it's just kind of thinking about where, what logistically might stop you from going to the gym or may present a problem for you. So those are things to consider. If you're a member of a gym, if you're not, where can you work out? Is it better to work out at home? Do you have a home gym? So there are all these kind of the logistics of your workout. Like kind of the best way to think about it is, what's going to stop you from walking into the door? Whether it's daycare or your job or the distance to the gym. So, what are the obstacles for you to getting to the gym, and how realistic are they? And then that kind of transfers over to how many days a week are you really going to be able to make it into the gym? The other logistical concern is just your fitness level too. So, if you're somebody who's an athlete in college and, you're always kind of a few weeks or months out of shape, then you might be a little bit easier transition than somebody who is really not comfortable in the gym or who is, not deconditioned. So that's also something to consider, because I think the more fit you are, I think the more specific you can and more experienced you are, the more specific you can make the program. And the less fit and the less experienced you are, the more you want to be safer. You want to do something that is both safe mentally and physically. You want to do things that are not going to frustrate you or discourage you from exercising.
So just a brief comment on that and a question. So if this is for someone who maybe hasn't worked out in years or has very little training knowledge, doesn't really know much about technique, even though it's DIY, would you recommend maybe getting a trainer in just to show some basic exercises, the form, the technique, or maybe looking it up online?
Yeah.
Do you worry about the safety, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I would always recommend doing whatever research you can on the exercise. When we get to the exercise component, we'll talk a little bit about that, but I would always recommend, trainers would be great, but there are millions of resources online, whether you're on YouTube for videos or exrx.net is a great resource for exercises. There are a couple of other really good resources for it. So I would definitely say, like, yes, do what you can to look. If you're not comfortable with exercises, a trainer would be great if you can afford it. If you can't, then if you have a good friend who you trust, that might help. But otherwise, just going online and looking things up, and when you're training, looking in a mirror and try to match up what you're seeing with what you've read and what you see in the pictures can help a lot.
And of course, probably you would not recommend complicated exercises for a novice.
Exactly. So if you're a novice,
to squat 300
if you're beginner
pounds.
novice, the simpler the better. Even if it means machines. Like sometimes you'll hear people say, "Oh, I never do machines because machines are blah blah blah," and to an extent there's some truth to that. But they're not bad. They're just not as good as some other things. But if you're not like I have somebody who I train one-on-one, and she just hates free weights and cables and just bothers her. So we do the machines because it's just there's a physical response to that stuff, and it complicates her life, and she doesn't want the complications, so she just does the machines, and it's much easier for her. So there's nothing. There are no machine. I mean, there are a couple machines I would avoid because I don't think they're good for you, but machines are fine if that's what's going to keep you, going to the gym. You just want to avoid obstacles.
Okay, so now what would step number 2 be?
So step 2 would be figuring out what your own goals are. Okay. So you've got short-term and long-term goals. So long-term, you might think, we've talked about this before. There's aesthetics, how you look. There's function. There's health goals. There's muscle, building muscle. There's losing fat. There maybe is an athletic goal. So those are things you might be thinking long-term. You might want to gain 10 pounds of muscle. You might want to lose 10 pounds of fat. You want to move better for your sport. You have high blood pressure and you need to lower your height. So there are those kind of long-term goals that you want to aim for. And then there's short-term goals. So, the goal is going to determine what type of a program you pick. And we'll get to that a little bit more in step 3. It's going to determine, what how you're going to work out. But short term, you still have to focus on something. So I tend to say, like, short term, if you have multiple goals, then pick one for the short term. It might be, let's say, the next 2 or 3. For most people, I'd say 2 months is a good time. Good time to kind of stick with the program, and then before you switch things up. But yeah, short term, you might say, okay, I'm going to focus on building muscle for the next couple. That'll be my focus. And yep.
So another sort of a similar question, once again related to novice people working out, right? Because certainly if you've done it before, you know the drill, you can get back in there. But for goals for someone who's a novice, how do they know what their goals should be, right? Let's say they're looking down and they see this big gut and they're like, well, I want to lose 50 pounds, right? How to sort of say, well, you're going to need this amount of time, or how much, or if someone says, well, I want to gain muscle, but how do they know how much muscle to gain or what to go for? Like, how should a novice approach their goals? So once again, and we don't know, obviously you can go into a trainer who
this
can tell
is
you what
kind
to
of
do.
Getting into step 3. So you're going to intuitively, know what you want. So you may not know an exact number, and you don't need to know an exact number. And often the number is actually wrong. Okay. So, there's some people who they lose 30 pounds and they're going to look completely different from somebody else who loses 30 pounds. So that's the first thing to really think about is, you have a rough idea of what you want. I want to build, most people I want to build muscle. I want to move better. I want to lose fat. I want to be more toned. I want to perform better in an exercise or daily activities. It's pretty straightforward. So if you have a more specific goal than that, you may be a little bit more advanced. Or for some people, they do have a very specific number. Like I have somebody who she wants to be 132 pounds because that's where she was when she graduated high school. And she just wants to get back. That's a number. She has that goal. So if you have that goal, fine. But it still comes down to, I want to lose weight. So I wouldn't get too bogged down in exact numbers. Just know if you want to put on muscle, you want to put on muscle. If you want to lose fat, you want to lose fat. That's also why it's a long-term thing, because those things change. So you have to split your goals into kind of long and short term, and long and medium and short term, because things change. You may find that after 30 pounds, you still feel like you need to lose more, or you may find that after 20, like, yeah, I'm pretty good here. I don't need to lose that extra 10. So I think I wouldn't get bogged down in the numbers as much as, really focusing a little more on an overall general goal, broad goal.
So now about that, what about people that say, I just want to be better shape? They have it's sort of the other the other
so
side of that.
let's get into step 3 because step 3 it looks like we're getting there anyway. So step 3 is basically determining kind of what type of a program you're going to be on. So you've got basically for the purpose of the DIY program, you got resistance training, which is generally your weight training, and you got cardio, which is whether you're at treadmill, bike. We're just thinking of a long distance, like longer distance, lower intensity, and then you've got strength and conditioning. I'm not going to get too much into that, but that's a little bit more sport specific. So if you're playing a sport, if you want to perform better in the sport, often that's going to require some level of strength and conditioning. Or if you're doing like CrossFit or something like that, where you want to, where performance is really important, that's involved. But we're not going to get too much into strength and conditioning because it then becomes very sport specific. And then we're going to we'd have to talk about every sport. But those, let's say, are the 3 areas that you're going to be thinking about when you're training. So if the goal for you is I just want to be fit, I just want to, be a little more toned, feel better, feel stronger, then I'd say almost a 50-50 split, of cardio and strength. Basically, you get 2-3 days a week of strength training, 2 or 3 days a week of cardio. If you've determined that you can make it, well, actually that's the next step, so we'll figure that out later. But basically, like kind of a 50-50 split. If you're just like, I just want general health. If you like weight training better, then do more weight training. If you like cardio better, do a little bit more cardio because it's more about you doing what's going to keep you going. So in that case, kind of 50-50 between the cardio and the strength. So if your goal is getting stronger or building more muscle, then you're going to shift it over more to strength training. So you might do 3-4 days of strength training and 1 or 2 days of cardio. If your ultimate goal is I just want to be bigger and stronger, then cardio is still important. So you don't want to not do it, but the resistance or the strength training becomes a little bit more important. So again, your breakdown is going to be more 75-25 as far as where your efforts are really going to lie between the two. Now the opposite. Now if your goal is fat loss, then it shifts, but not too much. So if your goal is fat loss, you'll probably shift slightly more cardio, but you need strength training. And really long term, the strength training is just as important as the cardio. So I would stay at 50-50 if your goal is losing weight. Now, if you have a really extreme, amount to lose, maybe it shifts slightly more, 60-40, slightly more cardio than strength. Or again, if you hate weight training, then we'll shift more cardio than strength only because you want to do something that's comfortable. But when it comes to losing fat, you still need to build muscle because the muscle will, as it increases your basal metabolic rate. So you better your metabolism, fat, the more calories you burn at rest. So I would shift it slightly to cardio, but still you're going to be, 60-40, cardio strength.
So I know what some listeners are thinking. Well, fat loss, isn't that a lot about diet?
Yes.
Well, we're not talking about diet right now, even though we all know that if you want to lose fat, it's, the diet is really
so that was the secondary thing.
The cream of it right there. And so we're going to do a DIY diet when Tony's on because she's the pro in that. So please tune back in
for the DIY diet.
For the DIY diet, yes.
So now, if your goal is more functional, more about more functional training, so again, it depends on the function. If it's more just daily life, just daily living, then it's going to be a mix of, again, 50-50, give or take. But when the strength training moves then have to be more geared towards movement, overall movement, and multi-joint and different planes of motion. So things that involve rotation and, moving the upper and lower body and that involve the core. There are a whole set of moves there that will help you kind of move better in everyday life. Now, the next level of that would be then sports. So, sports and athletics, those are all going to be things that kind of are daily living, just, taken up, a few degrees. So then it's still going to be split, with maybe a little bit more strength training, but those strength training moves then have to be specifically decided to meet whatever the sport is. And then also, if it is an athletic goal, then you're going to have to divide it between, let's say, almost, then it's like, I'd say, 40% strength and conditioning, or I'm sorry, 50% strength and conditioning, and then strength and cardio kind of split between. So then your strength and conditioning work becomes more important than the actual only cardio or actual only strength training because you really need to be training for that sport.
And and just about that, remember that your strength and conditioning doesn't replace the sport. If you want to be good at a sport, you have to do that sport. So so this is sort of your cross training, where you're training for the sport as a supplement to your sport.
No, that's a great point. And again, if you're at a higher level, this becomes a little bit different. But we're just talking about the average person. So if you got 4 days in the gym and you play basketball, then a couple of those days should probably be focused on strength and conditioning. You get a day of cardio, you get a day of strength, and that's kind of how I would break things up.
This is a little bit off topic, but people have asked me this all the time, and it's somewhat related. Let's say you don't have 6 days where you can play basketball 4 days a week and get in the gym. Some people only have that one day, so they need to combine the two. So can you work out right after you play basketball or right before?
It's not ideal, but you can.
Okay. Is it better before or after? From your experience,
it depends. Everybody's different. So, if your goal is playing basketball, then I would say you're better off playing the sport first and then doing the workout, because you don't want to. If you work out, it's gonna have some impact on your performance. So not that it's absolutely it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's better if you can do it maybe later in the day. But
once again, that's back into step one.
But now, also
right?
another thing I want to add, because you brought up a good point, is when I say if you go to the gym and you do a full cardio workout and a full strength workout in the same workout, that for me, for the purposes of this, is going to count as kind of 2 points for you, right? Like 1 point for the cardio workout, 1 point for the strength workout. So if you're limited in time, if you only have 3 days a week to work out, but you do 3 days where you do both, then that kind of counts as 6 points. So just kind of getting out there for, when we're talking about like you need a strength workout, that counts just to your strength bank.
I think that actually works as a perfect segue to the next step, which is the time commitment.
Yeah.
How much time do you have to commit to working out? And not only in how many days can you get there, but how much time in those days can you get there? So, and that also impacts the rest of your life. Like how much time do you have to drive to the gym? I know once again that sort of intersects with your logistical issues, but I think that's something very important.
Yeah. So we talked about this before, where the amount of time you put in is inversely related to the intensity that you put in. So if you only have 2 days to go to the gym, that you can do it. It's just that you have to work harder in those 2 days and put a little bit more into those 2 days than you do if you have 5 days to go to the gym. So when it comes to the time commitment, again, the first thing to think is, how many days can you make realistically? Now, for the most part, I'd say a minimum of 3 days a week in the gym. But if you can only make 2, then you just have to make the most of those 2 workouts. That means you're doing your strength and your cardio on both days, or, however you're breaking it down, you kind of need to meet that requirement. So when it comes to days per week, I'd say if the focus is really strength and getting bigger, you want to get at least 3 and more likely 4 to 5 good strength workouts in. And again, 1 to 2 cardio workouts. So again, if that's the main goal, you got to, you at least want to get absolute minimum of 3, but if you can, 4 or 5 would really be ideal. And then again, if you've determined that the goal requires more cardio, then it kind of flips around. You need at least, 3 solid days of cardio, and 1 to 2 days of strength. Now, the time, if you're doing strength, minimum 20 minutes. But ideally 40, 50 minutes. Now, if you have 20 minutes, that just means you need to do something. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but like you need to do like supersets, something where you're not really resting. Like if you got 20 minutes, you can't rest. You got to do like a circuit or supersets, something where, you do one exercise, then you do something else, and you're never really resting. So that way you can get as much work as you can in that time. If you have 40 minutes, that gives you a little bit more leeway to do, more full, traditional strength training program. And then the same thing applies with the cardio. If you have, if you're going to do 40 minutes, where your heart rate, 40 minutes at, let's say 70% of your resting heart rate, or of your 70% of your maximum heart rate, that's fine. Now, if you only have 20 minutes, that's fine, but you're probably going to have to go closer to 85% to really get the most out of your workout. So it just is that, the less time you have to spend in the gym, you just have to work a little bit harder.
So now, not everyone has an issue with doing it on different days. Maybe someone has a home gym, or like me, there's a gym, I walk downstairs in the gym. So getting there isn't the problem, but I'm busy. So maybe someone has a business, so they can only devote so much time to it. From your experience, in your opinion, someone tells you, well, look, I can get to the gym 2 or 3 days a week and I can spend 2 hours there, or I can go 5 or 6 days but I can only do 30 to 40 minutes. What do you like better? The more consistency in terms of days, or sort of packing everything into 2 days or 3 days?
For a beginner or novice, even intermediate,
I don't want to use the word consistency because they can both be consistent, but more spaced out or clumped into a big time.
I would say more clumped in.
So you think that 2 or 3 days?
I'm sorry. No, the other one. I would say more regular, less volume per day, but more days per week.
Gotcha.
Because that just builds it into like more of a lifestyle choice where it can be stressful, kind of thinking, oh God, I got to do this whole workout. For some people, that's okay. So again, it becomes a little bit person specific. Everyone's a little bit different. But I would say that if you can do more days and be shorter time but more consistent, I would stick with that.
Are there physical benefits to it as well?
At this level, not really. I mean, yes, because your own kind of fitness level starts to diminish almost immediately. So let's say you do 2 days a week. By day 3 off, you're starting to slow down a little bit. It's minimal, and you get right back as soon as you start. But I think the consistency helps build you a little bit stronger, a little bit faster. So, but at the same time, if you're working that much harder, if you're working much harder in those 2 days a week, then because your level of training is higher, you're actually going to get more fit because you're fit. You'll adapt to the level that you're training at. So if you're training at a lower level more days a week, you'll be less fit than if you're training at a higher level, a couple days a week. So that's another thing to consider.
Okay, so maybe we'll start to get into the real nitty gritty of it. So as our show notes would tell us, the next thing we're going to talk about is actually the details of the workout. What do you mean by the details of the workout?
Kind of like the parameters. So when you're strength training, traditional strength training program, you do an exercise, 8 to 12 repetitions, 4 sets, 8 to 12 reps. That standard works fine. You'll find tons of other different programs, but honestly, if you're just trying to get in shape, it's the easiest way to go, and it works. Works great. So again, trying to keep things simple. If you're doing a standard strength training program, I would pick a body part, whatever body part you're working, you pick, let's say 3 to 5 exercises for that body part. For each exercise, you do 8 to 12 reps. Now, when you finish those reps, it should be tough. So if you're doing 12 reps and you can keep doing 5 more, you're probably too light. And if you can only get, 3 reps out, it's probably too heavy. We've talked about, about this before. So you want to stick in that rep range. You can progressively increase the weight. So you might do, let's say if you're doing a bench press, you may start at 135 and then go up to 145 and go up to 155. So you can kind of progressively increase, and that will that will decrease the reps, assuming that you're lifting around the proper rep range. So I would say, that standard program is perfectly fine. How you split the muscles up it depends. I tend to like to do opposite groups. So, if you're doing a day, let's say you can do 3 days a week of lifting. You do pushing, pulling one day. So you might do, chest and back one day. You can do, biceps and triceps. So curling and extending another day. And then I do shoulders and legs another day. But that's just very specific. You can split them up in different ways. It's just that you need to kind of give yourself a day or two of rest in between, especially if you do chest one day, doing triceps the next day might be a little bit difficult.
Well, some people swear by doing related muscles. Some people like to do chest and
triceps. You can do that too. No, that's fine too. So I'm not saying there's any. Just when I was weightlifting, I tended to do that. The problem with doing chest and back is those are big muscles.
So you also want to consider
it's a lot of work to do. So it might be too much. But again, we're talking about if you're just kind of getting yourself into shape. I always found that to be a nice little split. And you don't have to go, you have to go crazy with it. But again, even legs becomes its own thing. So you got your quadriceps and the hamstrings and the glutes and the glute medius and the glute maximus and the abductors and there's the whole, your calves. There's a lot you can do with the legs too. So it's, and even the shoulders too. So just to kind of throw them away together. But again, if you're doing your own thing, just trying to get started, that's usually the simplest thing. If you only are doing 1 or 2 days of weight training, that's fine. You just have to combine it more. So you may have to do, like a full body, do everything in that one workout. So that really depends on the person and the time that you have. So the more days you have, the more you can split things up. When I was only weightlifting, the other thing I would just do 1 day of just chest and 1 day of just back and then 1 day of just arms and 1 day of just shoulders and 1 day of just legs, and you can do that too. Or for some people, if you're bodybuilding, you may need to do 2 days during the week of chest and so that changes things up a little bit. But again, for just a basic program, do what works. But if you only have 1 or 2 days to do your weight training, then you're probably gonna have to do a circuit or just do everything in 1 day, take a few days off and do everything in another day, but you just may spend a little bit more time in the gym for those days.
So now what about details of a cardio-based workout? Are you trying to up your time or maybe up your
so the main thing with the cardio, so
intensity in one way, whether it's running faster or a higher resistance on Stairmaster or whatever it is.
So first thing to consider is like there are ways things that you can use your heart rate if you want. You can look up your maximum heart rate and then train based on that. I tend to just do rate of perceived exertion. Where are you on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 is all out. You're almost done. 1 is you're sitting on your couch. It's really the easiest way to go. If you have, now you do want to increase the different variables. You have your speed, or you have your, the intensity and the time. And so and distance. So something there should get better as you're doing your cardio. So, over time. So if you're doing, let's say you're running at a 6 mile an hour pace, for 40 minutes, over the course of a few months, one of those variables should change. Either you go a little bit faster pace in the 40 minutes or you keep the pace. Or either you go a little bit faster pace for the 40 minutes, or you may need to increase your speed and do more distance. Or do less time but faster pace. So you might do 40 minutes at 7, or you might do. Wait, am I? Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So So you either do either increase your pace for the same time, or increase it at less time, or keep the pace. So you keep your 6 pace, but you do it for 60 minutes. So something's got to change. Either you go longer, you go or harder, or you go shorter, but even harder. So something's got to get, improve when you're doing your cardio in order to make progress. So if you're doing a longer distance, let's say you're doing 40 minutes or an hour, then you're probably going to be at a rate of perceived exertion of like 6 or 7, where, you're working, you feel like you're working, but you can still kind of hold a conversation. If you only have 20 minutes to work out, then that needs to increase. So it does need to be closer to like an 8. And if you're fit enough, even like a 9, at points, or you can then get into interval training. But again, we're sticking as basic as we can. So the shorter distance is going to require a little bit more intensity, and the longer distance then again can require a little bit lower intensity. But you still want to be around 6 or 7 when you're doing it. You don't want to be on the bike just reading the New York Times, or whatever you're reading. Just kind of hanging out. Like you got to be working, and over time something's got to get better. So either you again longer. Or more intensity, or shorter and a lot more intensity. So something there when you're doing your cardio, should change.
All right. So
one other thing I didn't mention, 2 things actually, is your rep range. So generally, you want to go through full range of motion when you're doing your exercises, whether it, whatever it is, go through as full of a comfortable range as you can. It's just again, it changes slightly because what is a full rep, like a bench press, I actually would say don't go through the full range, but for the most part with most exercises, go through a full range. And we've talked about this before. We talked about tempo. And so if you need to know more about the specifics about how fast do I the concentric and eccentric and all that stuff, just listen to the Tempo podcast, and that'll give you a little bit more information on those parameters. But then the other thing is rest. So if the heavier you're lifting, the more rest you need between exercises. So if you're doing really, really heavy weights, you may need 1 minute to 3 minutes to rest before you do the next set. If you're doing things that are a little bit more endurance based, then the rest time goes down. Or like I said, you can do things like supersets, which again, we'll talk to a little bit more when we do a little bit more advanced programs. So let's take a minute to talk about Freshly.com, our newest sponsor.
So pretty much in any industry, people will tell you if you want something really good, fast, and cheap, you can usually have 2 out of the 3. Unfortunately, I found when it comes to food, you often get 0 out of 3.
That's true. No, and actually, as having tried Freshly for a bit, I can definitely tell you it really is 3 out of 3, and it definitely resolves a few problems that I have. So I've talked ad nauseum on this show about my issues with food, and part of my problem is that I spend too much money doing it because I don't have the time to prepare food for myself. I don't even have time to use a service that sends me all the ingredients and I make it. So I don't have time for that, and so I end up spending way too much money. So effectively eliminating the cheap part, and then I also end up making poor choices. Constantly. Again, when you're left to your own devices, it's easy. I'm not alone in this, making bad choices when it comes to food.
And when you do cook, it's like you have to schedule. It's a whole night, and it can be fun, but it's like forget about doing anything else that night.
Exactly. So Freshly for me actually resolves a lot of this. And as I'm looking for the solution. So Freshly is a meal delivery service, and for as little as $8.99 a meal, you get everything sent to you. It's already made. It's already packaged. It's prepared by a chef. They're nutritionists on staff to make sure that it has the appropriate ingredients. It's made healthy and right. It's not frozen. And it really is. You throw it in the microwave, and 3 minutes later it's done. I put it in the toaster oven, and it works just as well for me. But it's a really, really a great service with some awesome food.
Now, someone might be saying $8.99 a meal. There must be some very cheap ingredients.
No, it's quality ingredients. And just a wide variety of meals on the menu. Steak peppercorn I tried was great. There's raised rosemary pork that was really good. I tried
the turkey shepherd's
pie. That was awesome.
Really
the meatloaf with cauliflower mash. There are also vegetarian options. So if you eat vegetarian or vegan, there's no added refined sugars. If you have celiacs, it's gluten-free, it's peanut-free if you have any allergies. So they really, go out of their way to make it accessible to a wide variety of people.
Ask anyone who knows me and they'll all tell you how much I love food, really good, awesome, tasting, delicious food. Of course, I'm also into this whole fitness and health thing. Yeah. And it's very difficult for me to eat something just because it's healthy if it doesn't taste good to me. And I know a lot of people are like that. So finding something that's both really tasty and healthy is like finding the Holy Grail.
Yeah, often healthy foods might taste good for being healthy foods, but they don't taste good when overall, compared to overall. But the Freshly meals are legitimately delicious. And each meal comes packaged with an ingredients list. So you know what you're getting, and you can see right there in front of you that it's healthy, good for you, and it tastes great as a bonus.
Now, one thing Ryan and I were adamant about when we started this podcast is that we weren't going to take sponsorship from just anyone. We had to really believe in the products and services. So now we want to reward our listeners for making a purchase that we think is going to be great for them.
Yes, and I really believe in Freshly. So if you want to order from Freshly, we got a great deal for you. It's really simple. When you go to Freshly.com to make your order, at checkout, use our promo code GymWits, all caps. So GYMWITS, if you don't know how to spell the name, which some people spell it with a Z, so that is important to point out. So GymWits, GYMWITS. At checkout, you get $40 off your first 2 orders. It's free shipping on every order. So you get 6 meals cooked by Freshly for $39.
Pretty hard to beat.
Yeah, so if you want a great meal and you want to put very little time into it.
And not too much money either.
Go to Freshly.com.
So the next obvious question is, what exercises do I do? Now, certainly if you come to mind based on the different goals of the person creating the program.
Yeah, so there are a few variables to consider. So first thing to consider is, what do you have access to? That's right off the bat, that's the most important, or the initial thing you have to use to consider. If you have a full-scale gym, the options are wide open. You have everything. If it's a home gym, it's going to be more limited depending on what you have. If you just have dumbbells, if you just have a band, if it's outdoors, if it's body weight. So there are a number of things to consider. So once you have determined, let's say, what you have access to, ideally you have access to everything. So if you have access to everything, then the second part is, okay, well, what's most comfortable for you? So if you're not a regular at the gym, or you're just starting, or you're not used to it, then the machines at the gym may be the easiest thing to go with, because they're straightforward. They have diagrams. They move in one direction. There's not a lot of thought that goes into it.
Just let's discuss about the goals. So you're saying machines. Now, what for this, maybe this little program, what goals or what program are you suggesting?
Well, I'm getting to that. So,
okay.
First thing to consider is just what do you have access to in your comfort level, right?
Okay.
So first thing is what you have access to. Second is your comfort level. Okay. So if you have a very low comfort level at the gym, then machines may be the easiest way to go to start, because it's the least requires the least thought. The least decision. You just say, okay, chest, great, I push. Shoulder press, great, I press up. You everything's kind of determined for you. You just have to decide the muscle group. So if you're comfortable in the gym, or you're more used to working out, then that opens things up in the gym. So a variety of exercises, things that use the dumbbells and the machines and the cables, some variety of, and body weight, all of those are kind of wide open for you. So one thing to consider is what type of, so now get to the type of program. So in general, when we're talking about, when we like to say like functional fitness, which is, kind of a buzzwordy term, but really just refers to movements that kind of mimic everyday life. And then that can get extended to that could just be, mimicking, walking up the stairs and putting your groceries away, or that could mimic athletic performance. So there's kind of a spectrum when it comes to functional training. So the more joints that are involved and the more kind of planes of motion. So planes of motion means, moving forward, back, moving laterally to the side, rotating, the more that's involved in the movement, the more functional the movement is. So assuming that you have a reasonable comfort level with exercises, then if your program is more, if the outcome is athletic based, or if the outcome is movement based, or the outcome is just kind of overall health and fitness and feeling better, then choosing exercises that involve multiple joints and multiple planes of motion would be ideal for a good deal of, as much of the program as you can make it, because those group muscles together, you're using your body. Your body's being used as a tool to produce these movements rather than just pressing against a machine.
So what are some examples of exercise?
An example, a squat is an example of a kind of a multi-joint exercise.
With weight or without, or both?
With weight, with or without weight. A torso chop would be something that involves rotation. You could do a lunge and rotate. So, we could go on forever as far as the different kinds of, a wood chopping type of movement. So there are a lot of movements like that, but then you can run the gamut. So you can have something that's like, a bench press is a multi-joint movement because it works on the shoulders and the elbows, but it's not the most functional exercise in the world because you're lying on your back. How often are you lying on your back pressing up against, an external object? Don't answer that question, Justin. I know you have something smart to say.
Well, I'm just saying, you haven't had to fix a bed recently where there was all stuff underneath it falling apart and you had to get on your back and push it up, right?
Okay, no, I haven't.
Well,
all right. All right.
Maybe you should.
I'll try not to. So anyway, you get, there are different levels of quote functional exercises. So if your goal is more just, I want to be, if it's more bodybuilding focused, if it's more like sculpting, more like I want to build certain muscles, then, you have to, you might need to pick exercises that kind of isolate muscles. So like a biceps curl is probably the least functional exercise I can think of, or one of the least. There's, you still can do different things, but if you're trying to build your arms, then that's going to be an important exercise because that's isolating that muscle. It's working one muscle, one joint. But again, not too often that we just flex the elbow with power against an object. So it's not the most useful exercise. But if you're trying to build muscles it's really the aesthetics are important, then you really do have to focus on muscle exercises that work those individual muscles in the areas that you feel you need to work on. Did you have a question?
I was just thinking about what you said with bodybuilding and then sort of backtracking to what you have available.
Yeah.
Some of your goals and some of the exercises that you're choosing are once again based on what you have available.
Yeah.
So trying to be a bodybuilder without access to a gym might not be the best plan of action.
Okay, so
maybe if you have some dumbbells.
No, that's not completely
like
true. Sometimes you see those videos where you got like, I remember there's a video or a thing, there's a meme on Facebook I saw where these guys like training in like practically in a backyard with like, some concrete, concrete plates and they were
well,
massive.
then you have to have access to that.
You can use anything as a weight. You just have to then get creative. In jails, I'm assuming they don't have massive fitness facilities, and those guys, guys can get pretty massive just with some dumbbells and a bench press, right, and a bar. So I wouldn't discourage somebody from a goal due to lack of equipment. Now, obviously, if you have nothing to externally resist against, it's going to be a little tough, and it's not ideal. But you work with what you have. So one thing I would say is, for most people, your program should include a mix of those exercises. So it should include a mix of free weights, a mix of machines, a mix of body weight exercises, a mix of very functional movements, a mix of isolation movements. Like you don't need to stick with any one style or any one thing. It's just that if your goal is more bodybuilding, you're going to be focused more on the individual muscles. And if your goal is weightlifting or powerlifting, then you're going to be doing specific exercises for that. If your goal is for sports, depending on the sport, you're going to have specific exercises for those sports. So, a mix is always going to be the best. And then, I talked about machines earlier. So, you'll get people, what's best? Free weights, machines, cables. We've talked about this before, but again, a variety is important. Free weights are great because you're doing all the work. If you're using a dumbbell, or even a barbell to make that object move the way you want it to move, you're doing all the work. You're deciding the direction it's moving, acceleration, deceleration, you're deciding everything. So in that way, that freedom forces the body to work harder. You're working, the joints are working harder. The connective tissue is involved. Your proprioception is involved. You're really, the neuromuscular control is a variable. So there's a lot going on with a free weight versus if you're just using a machine, where the machine, all you have to do, there's some more advanced machines now, but for the most part, all you do is push, and the machine's going to go in the direction that it's going to go. So the machines have one range of motion for the most part. And so you just have, so it takes away all that other work. The extra work that you have to do to control the weight gets taken out to a large extent because you just have to, push. So in that way, machines are less functional. But again, if you're bodybuilding and you take all that extra stuff out, that extra stuff allows you to work that much harder on that individual muscle. So, again, a variety is always going to be good. Doing a little bit of everything is going to be good, and then you cater it more to whatever your program is.
So now, say someone's goal and their direction is around something cardio based, like running. So I want to be a better runner. I want to run distances, or I want to do maybe even sprints type things, or I want to run long distances. The obvious answer is, well, you just got to run. Yeah. But are there other supplementary exercises?
Yeah, cross training is always going to be important. So
for someone who wants to run,
that would be almost an episode in itself. Like what? In fact, we should write that down. Like cross training with running. I'm going to write that down now. So that's an episode in itself. So I won't get too specific into it. But yes, cross training is important, and there are lots of exercises that are going to complement you with the endurance training. And the strength is important, and the strength will help. They work together, just like. The endurance will help you if you're doing a sport that even involves more strength. So they work together. It's just finding the right balance. Now, one other thing I will say is, I'm writing down cross training for running. All right. Now I've back down to that. Okay. So one other thing I'll say with exercise choice. So again, obviously there are thousands and thousands of exercises to choose from. So, I'm not really, it doesn't make sense to sit here and go through all the different ones. A couple of good resources. There's exrx.net, which has a whole database of exercises, that you can look for. And then, there are exercise things like on smartphones, like, I think Fitness Buddy is a good one that has a lot of exercises. So if you want to do something like Fitness Buddy or EXRX, or go on YouTube. The internet there's so many, you type in a muscle and you will find everything you need up there. In fact, even the podcast isn't necessary because the information we give you can, with an hour of looking around, you can probably find it. Not saying not to listen to it, because listen to the podcast.
But everyone was listening to us because they just liked us.
I'd like to think that. Maybe they do.
I'm going to think that.
I would hope so. That'd be kind of nice. I would hope that we're not turning people off. Like, people aren't listening in spite of their dislike of us. But reality is, like, anything you want to know, there's stuff there. Think about anything. Even you teach guitar, and like, there are tutorials for anything you can teach. So there. Now, there are obviously you're a
It's interesting.
faster.
I had that discussion with a student about if she wants to learn a song, if she wants to learn whatever, she could look it up on YouTube.
Yeah.
Of course, there is some pitfalls with that. Mainly form and technique.
Yes, no.
So that being the big issue.
So that's the other thing. Yeah. So especially with exercise, and that's where having a trainer there helps. Having a mirror is important. Form is always going to be a variable that's going to be part of it. Technique is going to be something that you're not going to get just doing YouTube searches.
In fact, you could do it wrong incorrectly.
And there's a certain amount of specificity that comes with having a professional watch what you're doing. So, for example, if I wanted to learn to play guitar and I just went online and did it, I may not have the right form. I may not have the right technique. And it may take me, a year to learn something that a professional could have helped that with specific input could have gotten me to get in, let's say, a couple of months. So
faster.
there's that.
From teaching guitar, I'll tell you this, and I'm sure you've seen similar results.
Yeah.
That not only do people who have learned, via YouTube do it wrong, but they've learned bad habits that are actually harder to unlearn. So not only have they hindered their progress, but they've also hindered their future progress as well.
So that's a great point. So
with exercises, you could learn something wrong with the guitar, and it's like, well, you sort of learned it wrong. Now you have to unlearn it. But with exercises, you can actually injure yourself.
Yeah. So that's another point that I would make is the less comfortable you are with the exercises, the more important it is to look in a mirror and really gauge your form and understand how good, how where your form is compared to what you're seeing on the video, and where it should be. And then it's always useful to, even if it's for once, you could take, say you make a program, you go through this whole process, you make a program. The whole point of this episode is kind of doing this without a professional. But what you could do is you create this program and then you have a professional look at you for one, session. Or if you have a friend that's a trainer or that's an exercise person, you say, hey, how am I doing this? Do these all look good? I just want to make sure that my form is good. So it can't hurt to have a professional to help you with the form at some point. Otherwise, just really make sure you're watching how you're moving, video, mirror, whatever you need to do to make sure your form is okay. Hell, if you video doing the mouth. Yeah, if you video and you want to send us a clip, we'll tell you what the form looks like. I'll tell you what the form looks like too. I'm more than happy to do that. But
some gyms now offer clinics on more complicated exercises like a squat or you
get that sometimes.
Different things. Some of them do.
Not everyone.
My gym was doing that.
And that's something that I would love. I'm intending on doing. We keep saying this, but once we start getting videos up, I think one of the first videos I want to get up would be actually like, there are some core exercises, whether it's a squat or a bench press or a lunge, some kind of core movements that almost everything is a progression on that or an extension on that move, and so doing kind of a tutorial on what are these moves and what points do you need to look for. Like a squat is a good example. There's so many things based on a squat that if you get the fine points of the squat down, you can extend that to a lot of different exercises. So there's certain points that you're going to be looking at for a lot of other exercises. So that's something I'd love to get up, and I hope that we have the chance to start recording these soon. It's just a matter of, like anything, it's time and money, or not making money to put the time in to do that. So at some point, once we start getting our YouTube really up and running, that's a goal of mine, is to really get like kind of a core workout series where we say, these are the things you want to look for when you're doing a squat or whatever it is. So yeah, like I said, with Exercise Choice, you've got, you have your resources, look them up. You can always send us an email and say, hey, what are some good whatever exercises? And I'm more than happy to put up a PDF with like, here's some great chest exercises, whatever. Just shoot us an email at TheGymWits@gmail.com.
All right. So what if we have some more experienced people with either lifting weights, exercising in general, and they're like, well, I haven't done it for a while, I have experience, I know what I'm doing, I want to do a little bit more of an advanced program. Or maybe someone has been doing the same program and they're not progressing, they're like, all right, now I want to advance a little bit.
So a couple ways to change things up. If you want to do something a little bit more advanced, and these are things, again, easy to look up online. These are some you know, in my experience, I've found you stick with what works, and I've been doing for 15 years, some of these, and it works well. So if you want to change things up a little bit, you don't have to go crazy. You don't have to get too advanced. You just, you know, just pretty simple. So one is just a basic circuit. So, you know, you have to decide, is the circuit more cardio based? Is it more muscle endurance based? Is it more strength based? So basically a circuit would be a series of exercises. It could be 4, it could be 10, it could be 20, but a series of exercises where you work for either timed or for repetitions, and then you immediately go to the next exercise. So my typical circuit when I do classes is I do a minute on and then a 15-second break, which, you know, 10-15-second break where you set up the next, you know, station that you're at. So, but you can mess with this. You could do a little bit shorter, you could do a little bit longer, you could do, you know, I'm not going to do time, I'm going to do 10 reps of everything, you know, so there's no standard, you know, you can mess with it. If you want to do something where you're more muscle endurance based, where you really focus more on the muscles, then the weights are going to be heavier. If you're going to do something that's more cardio based, then you might do lighter weights, and you may include cardio exercises. So you might do, you know, a set of burpees followed by a set of squats, followed by a set of mountain climbers, followed by a set of lat pull downs. So you have to decide again if it's more muscle endurance or more cardio. That, you know, that's where, or you may do something where you're doing very little weighted exercises, it's just all cardio. So when you're doing a circuit, it's just a matter of determining, you know, what's the outcome you're really looking for, and then focusing that circuit on that. But like my standard circuit is, I kind of do two things. I do this, you do 1 minute on, 15 seconds off, and 10 exercises. And then you take a little break and you repeat that. So that's one thing I'll do. And then the second version is a minute and 20 seconds on, 20 seconds off, and 15 exercises. And you just do that once. The math works out the same. So that's my kind of like standard circuit when I teach classes.
I did that one today.
Okay. So yeah.
One that you sent me a while ago.
So that's
I just want to check out Justin's new fat burning workout.
Yeah. So that's my standard circuit that works really well. It, you know, gets the right balance. And then you just have to decide again whether you want to include more cardio or more strength-based exercises. Now, another option is supersets. So this is a way to get in and out of the gym quickly. So you do 2 exercises back to back. With no rest in between. So the idea being that, you know, a typical workout, you do 3 sets of 10 reps or whatever of an exercise, you rest in between each set. So this eliminates that rest. So while you're resting, let's say you do a chest and back, you do a bench press followed by a lat pull down. While you're resting the chest from the bench press, you're working the lats, doing the lat pull down. Or you could do an upper and lower. So you could do like a bench press and then squats. So while the upper body's resting, the lower body's working. So basically it just shortens your rest period. So it becomes slightly more, you're doing a little bit more work in that time, and you can then get in and out of the gym a little bit quicker. And it increases your heart rate. So it's slightly, you know, more cardiovascular than a standard workout.
Now, what about an exercise maybe for one group where you lower the weights? Remember that where like you'll start, maybe you're doing a lat pull down, so you start at one weight. So that's a drop set.
That's another great bodybuilding thing, standard for a long time, and it works. Is doing drop sets. So you'd start with, let's say, you know, a heavy weight. Let's say you're doing a lat pull down. You'd start with you know, whatever. Let's say you do 100 pounds. This is your heavy weight. You do 8 reps of 100. Then you'd immediately lower to, you know, 80 pounds. And then you keep going. You do another 8 reps. And then you immediately lower again and you do another 8 to 10 reps. So that is just drop set. So it really works because as the muscles fatigue at the weight that you're using, you lower it to another weight that's tolerable. And then you just keep going, further fatiguing the muscle, breaking the muscles down. And then again, once you reach fatigue there, you lower it again and you just keep going. So you can do 2 or 3 drops with that, whatever works. Another thing I like to do is you do the first 2 at reasonable weight, and then the last one you lower the weight a lot and you just go really fast. But again, that's another thing you can play with different methods of doing it. You could look up different styles. So another one of those things, drop sets work really well. And the other thing I do is high intensity interval training is another way to do it. So the way that I do is kind of a modified Tabata style, which is another episode we got to do eventually. It's been on my list of things I want to talk about in a while, or talk about for a while. But Tabata is going to be usually 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, and you do that 8 times. So you pick an exercise, and that's what you do. You do 20 seconds as fast as you can, and then you rest for 10 seconds, and you do 20 seconds again as fast as you can, you rest for 10. So when you're doing this with weights, it's light weights. And my objective, if it's a weighted exercise, is try to get up to 20 reps of each thing. So if you're doing like a bicep curl, try to get 20 reps of the bicep curls each round, which becomes tough. Like even doing that with like 5 or 8 pounds, even if you think you're strong, like 5 or 8 pounds becomes real heavy really fast when you're doing something like that. So you could do it with weights. You could do it with, I've had success doing it with cardio exercises. There's a style, it's modified on the Tabata style because it's not as intense as what the real thing would be. But it's again another great way to work out, a little bit more advanced. Just make sure whatever you're doing that that you've kind of progressed yourself up to doing it. So don't go from not working out in 6 months to getting on a treadmill, putting it at 14 and like sprinting like that. Not a good idea. You want to build yourself up to whatever it is. And if 8 rounds is too hard, then start with 4 or 6. So, the goal though is trying to keep the intensity up. So I'd rather if I have a client that I'm working with, and let's say we're doing something that is challenging, I'd rather that they do fewer rounds at high intensity than more rounds at lower intensity. So that's my only little thing. That's just how I like to work with clients, because the goal is really focusing on the intensity of the work. So, but that's it. And I think that's. I don't know. Are there any other questions you have?
No, I think that covers the DIY program.
Yeah, so I think that's it for that. If you have questions, of course, shoot me an email. More than happy to answer. Otherwise, we have an Ask the Trainer. Let you do the duties.
So it comes from Jessica. And she says, "Hey guys, I love your podcast. I've been listening on Spotify for about a year now, and you both really helped me achieve my goal of finally becoming a fitness professional. I started school."
That's awesome.
That is awesome. Congratulations, Jessica. I started school through my gym back in October and received my CPT certificate in May. And that same month was recruited and began teaching group fitness at a boutique club. As much as I fell in love with it, I quickly fell out of love when I realized how monotonous it would be for me to try to make a living off of such a small club alone. So now I am going through the interview process to be a personal trainer at a big box club. And she goes on to say that she has an interview today and she's nervous. Anyways, I'm just curious as to what advice you have for a new rookie CPT. For instance, what you wish someone would have told you in terms of meeting new clients, building your business, etc. What some of your biggest takeaways are at this point in your life in terms of training. The sales aspect is the most daunting for me, and not even so much as getting them to fall in love with me and my craft, but more so approaching people in the gym that otherwise, as far as I can see, really don't want to be approached. Having headphones or I know what I'm doing attitude. And what are some mistakes made in program design for clients? All around, I appreciate your time and words of wisdom. Keep up the awesome work on the podcast, you guys. I haven't found another one that even comes close. In parentheses, not that I'm looking, but you don't have to look because we're so awesome. P.S. Tell Tony I say hi. She and I spoke on a few occasions after I heard her on your podcast, and she is one that encouraged me to write to you. P.S. I won't be offended at all if you don't air my question on the Ask the Trainer episode. Well, we're going to have an Ask the Trainer episode coming up.
Yeah.
But because I didn't read this till the very end, you get put on the DIY episode.
Yeah. So that's a loaded question. I forget if we did an episode on it. It's funny, we do so many episodes that we. So if you have a chance, look up the episode we did do about I think so you want to be a trainer or something along those lines, because I think there's some of this I'll be going over again. Congrats on becoming a trainer, and it's awesome that we inspired you. It's kind of cool sometimes when you hear the impact that the podcast has on people. That's pretty, it's awesome to hear. So there are a few things I think when it comes to training. The first thing I would teach anybody is patience, which is easier said than done depending on your life situation. It's a little bit different if like you're, let's say you're a single parent that needs to make a living. That's gonna be a lot different than if you're a college student who lives at home and has kind of support. And so it's easier to say, to that person, oh, well, you just got to be patient, than it is to somebody maybe where there's some sense of urgency to make an income. So my first thing, I definitely think going to the big box gym is a good move. the problem with the boutique places is exactly that. It's really boring. There's a much smaller group of people, not only as far as potential client base, but also other trainers. So one really important thing at being at a big gym is that there are other trainers there. And assuming that you have a good morale, good staff morale, and a good group, you can learn from those trainers. And there's a lot you can take from being around other people. I take stuff from, just being around new trainers every day. I can take things away just watching what they do. And, it's like, oh, I'm stealing that exercise. I'm taking that, thing. So if you're not around a lot of other fitness professionals, it's hard to get that. So I think it's really a good move to be around a community. The second part, when it comes to sales, sales is, fitness becomes more about sales than it is, about actually being a fitness professional for the beginning of your career. So, a lot of it is, finding your own niche. Like for me, I'm very shy, especially around people I don't know. And I hated the whole walk up to new clients and try to talk to them and get to know them. So I think one of the best pieces of advice anyone gave me was kind of thinking of when you're dealing with new clients as kind of planting seeds. And it's the most genuine for someone like me who, I just want to help people. I realize that I have to make money, but I don't want to go around being a salesman. So what I wanted to make sure is I wanted to disarm people and make sure that they knew that they could approach me without fear of me trying to sell them. So, when you do interact with people, just interact with them naturally. Become a resource for information and for help for the clients, because they will go to you and they will talk about you and they will tell other people about you. And when they make the decision to work with a trainer, they'll go to you. So I think that's one really, important key there, is to really build relationships, but that are based on, something real and that you have something to offer rather than worrying about sales. Again, it's easy to say that, but it's maybe harder if you're in a position where you need to earn money. But planting those seeds will pay off years down the line. You have situations where, years later, I have people that decide, I want to work with the trainer, I'm going to work with you. And it might be a couple sessions, but they want to work with you. So I think, now, my approach also was being different. So I just, I realized like I'm not going to get clients by walking up to everybody and being that, extroverted, personable person. I needed to be different. So I just did different stuff. I did exercises and things that nobody else was doing because that's how I stood out. And so I did things where, I was going to make, half the gym was like, wow, what's that? I want to do that. And the other half of the gym was like, screw that guy. I'm never working with him. That looks crazy. But that was how I was able to separate myself from the pack. I couldn't do it kind of verbally, but I was able to do it that way. So one thing is to consider, how can you separate yourself from all the other trainers? The other thing is, there's so many things. That's where I'd say, like, definitely listen to the episode where I think we do more of a step-by-step on how to kind of approach that, but also just be patient. That's part of it. Is as you build your own client base, your clients become mouthpieces for you, and they become the people that will refer you to other clients. But that takes a long time. And, I finally got to that point where I turn more people away than I bring in because it's gotten to that point where I get referrals just from other clients. But it does take time. So it's a tricky landscape to navigate, especially your first 6 months to a year. And that's why there's such a high turnover. Is the first few months. I know Justin's like looking at me like, when are you going to stop talking? No. But there's a lot, that's where people turn over, is because they come in expecting to make really good money right away. And it's just not the reality. Is you're trying to convince people to part with hard-earned money to work with you for an hour, and I'm always amazed that people will spend that and do it. And so it's one of those things that takes time. But as long as you're patient and you put the work in, it'll happen. If you're committed to personal training, and the other thing I would say is, it sounds like you started group fitness, which is another great thing to do. So one of the best decisions I made was to start doing group fitness, because while the pay for the hour isn't as good as one-on-one training, the great thing about group exercise is that it's stable. So assuming you can get stable classes, it's a stable, you're making a certain amount of money per day or per week. The other important thing with group exercise is it opens you up to a whole new group of potential clients. So like I've gotten lots of my new clients just through my classes because they like how I teach. And then they know I'm a trainer, and so it just works well. So definitely stick with group exercise. Try to get as many classes as you can, and that will also help you. But beyond that, I think the biggest thing I'd want you to take away is just be patient. And if it's necessary, you may need, again, if your life situation requires that you need a certain amount of money, that may require another job, to kind of supplement your income until your personal training income can kind of be enough that you can keep going with it. But it usually takes most people 6 months to a year of really being consistent and putting the work in to seeing the results. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, for various reasons, they don't or can't stick with that. And the other thing is, it's a chaotic world, so always kind of don't get complacent. So when you get to the point, that would be the one piece of advice I would give you that I wish I had, is once you do find your success and you're at a point where you're making enough, enough is never enough. You always need to be making like 10 to 20% more than you need to serve as a cushion. And don't be complacent. Whatever works for you, whether it's, I did a lot of online advertising and stuff. Once you're at a level where you're happy, don't get complacent with all the other stuff that you were doing, because if you lose a couple really good clients, you're back
and that
back
will
scrambling.
happen.
Yeah. So you always want to be prepared for that kind of scramble. For, me, the economic turn down in 2008 hit me hard, and I wasn't prepared, and it was a huge problem. So just always kind of be ready to get new clients. And it's better to be turning down clients or sending clients to trainers that you trust than it is to not have that coming in. So that would be it. I mean, you're gonna get tons of other kinds of advice, whether, that are kind of more salesy, building relationships and networking and all that. And some of that might work for you. So you also have to think what might work for you. What people do you know? Doing a blog, having a podcast, all that stuff helps. And you just have to find your angle that works. So it was a little bit long-winded, but I hope it helps. And if you have any other follow-up questions, again, shoot us an email and we're happy to help out.
Yeah,
did you have anything to add to that, Justin? You're a freelancer, so I don't know if there's anything
it's very similar. I think one bit of advice that I'll give is never bank on anything. It kind of goes with what you were saying, right? You have a client and you're relying on that income, right? Oh, I have this client, I get paid $100 an hour or $80 an hour, whatever, and we're scheduled twice this week and twice the next, so you need that money, and then the person gets sick.
Yeah.
Right? Or the person has to go away on a business trip all of a sudden, and you're like, but, I booked that time.
Yeah.
And you can't really say to them, well, I need that money, because you just can't.
You can't.
Now, if someone cancels on you, that we talk about that too, how to deal with that. That's sort of a separate issue, and that's sort of a tricky thing.
That's its own issue where you have to make decisions for yourself as far as how you want to run your business. But it is an issue. But I had that happen to me. That was what happened I had 2 clients who were doing 5 days a week. And that was figure that's 10 hours a week of income. For anybody, you take away 10 hours a week of income consistent, and they both stopped at pretty much the same time. So that hit me hard, because that was like a significant percentage of the money I was making, from these 2 clients who left at the same time when they needed to pay, when I needed the money. So yeah, it's one of those things where it never ends with fitness. Unfortunately, you're always a few clients away from, having to hustle again. So the more you can be prepared for that, the better. But otherwise, I guess that is it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, as usual, all of our stuff is at TheGymWits.com. And I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic, reminding you that truth does not sell.
And we are the GymWits.